This week on BOI Weekly. An exclusive interview with the Chief Operating Officer of the Bank of Industry, Rashid Olaoluwa, who received us warmly into his office. I'll be taking him up on the challenges of industrialization in Nigeria, how the bank gets funded, about job creation, among other things.
The agricultural sector due to limited processing and preservation capacity. This results in high food prices and food importation with its attendant effects on the nation's foreign reserves. To enable Nigerians optimize the benefits from the country's vast agricultural products such as cassava, oil palm, rice, tomatoes and others, the Bank of Industry has launched a 5 billion naira cottage agro-processing fund, the CAP Fund. Customers can access the fund to establish plants to process our various agro-produce into food products or intermediate raw materials for industries at a single-digit interest rate of 9% per annum. For more information on the CAP Fund, please visit www.boinigeria.com/capfund. Bank of Industry, developing Nigeria's agro-processing industry through the CAP Fund.
Thank you so much for speaking to us on the Bank of Industry Weekly. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. You have been in the financial services sector for quite a while, with a track record of success that may have earned you this relatively new role of driving the nation's industrialization dreams through the Bank of Industry. Tell us, how has the journey been?
Okay, we've just embarked on the journey. I only got here about 5 months ago. And, you know, when you get to a new position like this, by my training, I learned to do a current position assessment. You know, you want to know what's the current status, where are we, what are the issues, what are the key drivers of success. And I've done that. I know our strengths, I know our weaknesses, I know where the opportunities lie, and I know the threats that we need to avoid. And what we're trying to do is twofold. First, we want to adopt global best practices in a number of areas, in terms of governance, in terms of risk management practices, in terms of compliance, in terms of customer service, in terms of a number of areas. And secondly, we want to increase the amount of impact that we make in the society. So we are embarking on a number of what I call, you know, transformational projects within the bank to ensure that we're able to pursue these two broad objectives. We've set for ourselves very ambitious goals, strategic goals, so that in the next 5 years, we would like to be a best-in-class development bank in Africa. Today, we are not in the top 10, and we would like to rank, we'd like to be rated very high among the development banks in the continent. We are the best, we are the biggest economy in Africa, and there's no reason why we cannot have the best development bank as well.
But still tracking your success, before your appointment as the CEO of the Bank of Industry, you were UBA Capital CEO, and you recorded a Q1 jump, that's the revenue jump of 194%. Your profit after tax also went up by 92%. I watched your interview at that time, and you gave excellent points about what drove that growth. Let me ask you, what are the drivers you're putting in place to help secure and strengthen the nation's industrial sector, in clear terms?
Okay, first, I think up to this point, you know, BOI has been funded largely by government. We know the current situation with government finances. We know that we cannot continue to rely on government funding. So one of the key initiatives we're taking is moving the bank forward, you know, in a way that we're able to independently, you know, raise financing. The best way to do so is to ensure that we're attractive as an institution. Okay, so we're doing a lot of institutional capacity building. And this is why, you know, I made reference to the need to adopt global best practices. And by the way, we're in the process of getting our first credit rating as an institution. Augusto & Co. is working with us on this. We're also in the process of being ISO certified. We're almost concluding that as well. The whole idea is that we want to be a well-run institution. We want to manage our risks very well. We want to ensure that we have very good asset quality. And once we have very good ratings, we will be able to approach the fund providers, be they domestic bond buyers or even international market, or even multilateral development agencies, to be able to raise funding. For me, that is very critical to the effectiveness of Bank of Industry going to the future. Luckily, the Ministry of Finance, the coordinating minister of the economy, they are putting together a wholesale development bank, which has attracted funding in excess of $1 billion. We see this as a huge opportunity for BOI. What that means is that BOI can also approach that wholesale development bank for funding. The funding will always be guaranteed in the sense that, given all the things we are doing today, we believe that that wholesale development bank will find BOI attractive, although the funding may come at a slightly higher cost, but it's still okay in the sense that at least the fund is available. Now, once we're able to mobilize this funding, we have also sectors that have been identified in the Nigeria Industrial Development Plan, which was launched by the Mr. President this February. 4 key sectors have been identified: agro-processing, solid minerals and metals, gas, energy and petrochemicals, as well as light manufacturing. Now, these sectors are being focused on right now at the Bank of Industry to ensure that we can propel the industrial sector. But having said that, we are also not ignoring the SME sector, which right now accounts for less than 10% of our portfolio. What we're trying to do is to ensure that in the medium term, we can increase that percentage to at least 30%. Some of my colleagues, are pushing for 40%, but again, we'll try and, balance that and see how well we can do. In addition to that, we also have seen a number of critical sectors that may not be 100% wholly commercial today, but are very critical to Nigeria's economy. So, for instance, if you look at the recently rebased GDP, you observe that the Nollywood contributed about 1.42%, to our GDP in 2013. Now, that's significant because this was an industry that developed on its own without much government intervention by way of policies. So we're looking at what can we do. We also know that the major challenge in that sector is the issue of piracy. Okay, so we're coming from the perspective of using technology, as a solution to counter piracy. It's not a question of just carrying policemen to Alaba to go and seize pirated copies. How can we use technology to drive this? And some engagement has happened. For instance, you may have heard of Gaboski G Media. BOI supported that venture. They've launched. It's a business model that ensures that movies can be distributed on DVD. It's more difficult to replicate, and they also have an online platform where you can actually go and watch the movies for a fee. So that's what we're doing in that sector. We're also engaging with the United Nations Development Program on renewable energy. And this is something I'm very passionate about. We are looking at the possibility of supporting off-grid solar energy solutions, for the rural communities that don't have electricity. Africa has been able to leapfrog in telecoms. We moved from the 090 analog systems, from landlines that were less than 400,000 in Nigeria, to today we have 120 million mobile subscribers in Nigeria. That's a leapfrog. Now, how can we do that in the solar energy business? We have been able to find that there's also a way we can do that using technology. The magic in the ICT sector was the pay-as-you-go, billing system. And we've been able to find people who have the technology that can be equally leveraged, for the solar energy. And we're having discussions. We are on a 50-50 sharing basis, cost sharing basis with United Nations Development Program in Nigeria. And we have the access to renewable energy, which is, we call it ATRI. You can get more information on our website. What we're trying to do is to ensure that we can deploy, working with Nigerian companies, we can deploy this technology across the rural communities. And, it will just be an alternative to PHCN, alternative to the discos that we have today. Because we must find a way to quickly, get our poor masses to have access to electricity.
The CEO also speaks about the ongoing restructuring exercise in the organization.
Recently, we inducted 10 of our best customers into our Hall of Fame, again, to encourage people who obtain loans and over time were able to repay the loans as and when due. At the same time, we also had a blacklist, people who, more or less, abandoned their accounts, misapplied the funds, and, defaulted in their loan payments. So these are some of the things, signals. We're signaling to the market that, we're very serious about supporting businesses, about supporting projects, but we're also very serious that if you do not pay us, you will not have peace of mind. So these are the kind of activities that we're also doing to ensure that the signal is received in the marketplace.
In order to be able to meet its funding obligations, the Bank of Industry is also reaching out to multilateral development institutions around the world.
AFDB has actually offered us $100 million. We have almost concluded the documentation to enable us, achieve disbursement. And what we're pushing for is that before the end of this year, that money should be disbursed to us. Now, that will be a step in the direction of ensuring that we get funding, from non-government sources. But in addition to that, we are also reaching out to a number of other multilateral development institutions. We've started talking to BNDES of Brazil. We are talking to Industrial Development Corporation of South Africa. We are talking to FMO of Netherlands, and so on and so forth. And we believe that with proper packaging of especially our SME intervention, we should be able to get positive responses. But that is in the short term. In the long term, what we are planning is that we can actually do a bond issuance. Okay, so, once we've had, consistent performance in terms of, moderate profitability, moderate obligor rating as an entity, we can approach the market and say, hey, we need 5-year loan of 50 billion, 100 billion naira, and we should be able to raise the money. The Industrial Development Bank of South Africa, they have just raised 15 billion rands, which is about roughly $1.5 billion. There's no reason why BOI cannot be elevated to that status.
And since taking over in May this year, you've introduced a couple of initiatives and funds into the system. You've just signed a 13.6 billion pact with the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development as intervention funds for rice and cassava milling in the country. You've also introduced the CAP fund. Tell us more about these funds.
I mentioned earlier that the Nigeria Industrial Revolution Plan identified 4 sectors. From our internal assessment, the most impactful most wide-ranging in terms of impact of the sectors is the agro-processing sector. Therefore, we are very actively engaged with the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. So first, we work with them on the Cassava Bread Fund, under which about 35 companies, were supported, through a combination of loans and grants. And these companies have been able to establish high-quality cassava processing plants, and a number of master bakers were also supported, to be able to use the flour that comes out of the processing plant and use it to bake bread. That has been concluded successfully, and the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and the Minister, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, is very pleased, with our performance. And that encouraged them to go into the next step, which is the recent 13.6 billion naira MOU that we signed with them about 2 weeks ago, to finance 10 medium-sized rice mill, each one capacity of 36,000 metric tons of paddy, and 6 high-quality cassava mills, each one capacity of 18,000 metric tons. The whole idea is we want to fast-track the establishment of these mills in the next few months, such that the cassava that is coming out of the agricultural transformation agenda of Mr. President can get processed, because we don't want to have a situation where we have post-harvest losses. We don't want the cassava to become what they call stick in the ground. So we want all these initiatives to be all related and comprehensive, so that we can actually reduce, the ultimate objective is to reduce food imports. 2 of our institutes in this country have developed technologies that can be used for agro-processing. And interestingly, some of the technologies have been adopted by businesses, and they're actually running very profitably, and they're getting bigger and bigger. One of them is FIRO. FIRO is the Federal Institute of Industrial Research in Oshodi. The second one is Project Development Institute, a place where I went last week. These 2 institutes, they've developed incredible technologies that Nigerians all need to do is just approach them, and they can get you the equipment you require for cassava, for this, for that. So I think Nigerians, we need to appreciate what we have.
Coming up on BOI Weekly, the CEO speaks to young entrepreneurs trying to access funds, urging them to answer key questions of every business startup.
What are you trying to sell? Who are you going to sell to? What's the target market? What is your value proposition? In other words, what is it about your product or service that will make people patronize you? Because there are so many businesses around. So why should they come to you?
In the agricultural sector, due to limited processing and preservation capacity. This results in high food prices and food importation, with its attendant effects on the nation's foreign reserves. To enable Nigerians optimize the benefits from the country's vast agricultural products such as cassava, oil palm, rice, tomatoes, and others, the Bank of Industry has launched a 5 billion naira cottage agro-processing fund, the CAP Fund. Customers can access the fund to establish plans to process our various agro-produce into food products or intermediate raw materials for industries at a single-digit interest rate of 9% per annum. For more information on the CAP Fund, please visit www.boinigeria.com/capfund. Bank of Industry, developing Nigeria's agro-processing industry through the CAP Fund.
From our experiences on the field, talking to businesses and manufacturers, we do know that some of them want to start businesses. They want to go into an area they do not have the capacity for. They're very passionate, they want to do the business, but the truth is they're not equipped to do it. How are you helping bridge the gap between passion and really getting business going?
That's a very, very important question. Just last week, I met with a young man in my office. He's been sending me emails, very passionately asking for support about a particular business. And I arranged for one of my general managers to meet with him. And the feedback I got was that he wasn't very serious. But he kept coming back to me, you know, and when I noticed that passion, I said, okay, let him come and have a meeting. And then I invited the general manager also, and we had a meeting, 3 of us. After listening to him for 10 minutes, I had to ask him, you know, young man, I can feel the passion. I can hear the surrounding point, but I don't understand the core what they're trying to do.
And he's been carrying that for years, maybe.
Yeah, and so I just asked him a question. I said, okay, so what's a business model? He said, what's that? So for me, I knew immediately that we have a problem where people are trying to do business, but they don't understand the rudiment of doing a business. So I asked him, do you have a business model canvas? He said, what is that? I said,